plot twist.
What up YouTube, BonzEye here, back with another Melanesians react. So this is going to be the final part of Allan's journey into Warhammer 40K. If you've been tuning in all along, thanks for sticking by, and if you're new to the series, you can click here to go back to part 1 and start the series off that way. Anyway, in this episode, Allan will look into the Necrons and the Tau, after which I'll be asking him about his favorite faction throughout all the Xenos and then his favorite faction overall. So yeah, with this intro out of the way, let's get right into the video.
Alright Allan, you ready to finish off this and learn about the last two races?
Yes, the Necrons, that's where we stopped.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Let's go.
Alrighty.
The Necrons are spooky, scary skeletons and very grimdark again. They have a much more fleshed out lore than before. Back in the day, they were just undead Egyptian space terminators, and they still look that way, but now they actually have a story. So way back in the day, you had the Necron tier. Kind of see a theme here: Eldari, Eldar, Krork, Orc, Necron, and Necron tier. So the Necron tier were this race of generally kind of shitty people. Not because they were personally shitty, because their lives were awful. They were ill-fated to a horrible existence of like radiation and a terrible planet they lived on, and everything just really sucked. Being a Necron tier was just really depressing. They really were looking for immortality. They were extremely reliant on the hope that they would eventually find the key to living forever and just stave off this horrible nature that they were thrust upon them, and therefore they could become the most dominant race in the galaxy. And they found this group. They're called the Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in StarCraft, right? These Old Ones were these strong, pretty much omnipotent beings. And they, of course, knew the key to immortality. So the Necrons went to them and said, please, show us your ways. And the Old Ones said, piss off. Not really. They were a lot more humble about it. But they did not want to share their secret of immortality with the Necrons. The Necrons, of course, took this very well and waged war with them. Kind of under this united banner. The Necron different dynasties didn't really like each other. But under this one man, the Silent King, he thought the best way to unite his race was to do this giant war with the Old Ones out of spite for them keeping the secret of immortality to them. This was known as the War in Heaven, and this is actually a multi-stage war. Because during this war in heaven, they discovered the Star Gods, a whole new race of people known as the Catan. The Catan. These Star Gods were also very much like Old Ones, almost omnipotent beings, and they too had the key to immortality. And so the Necrons went to them and said, hey, can you help us fight off the Old Ones? Can you help us kill these Old Ones, you, the Catan? And the Catan said yes. And in fact, we can help provide you with the immortality you so desperately seek. So the Silent King of the Necrons decided to make a pact with the Catan to allow them to accept this generous gift of immortality upon them. But this, of course, had been a horrendous trap, and the Necrons were dragged in chains to this biotransference where their flesh was stripped from them, replaced with nothing but a metal hollow shell, as their souls were ripped from their body and fed to the Catan. And the Catan fattened up. They got chonk on the souls of the Necrons. As this was their plan all along, they consumed the flesh and souls of the Necron tier and turned them all into unwilling robotic slaves just to serve their will. And then with their new-founded Necron army, they pointed their guns at the Old Ones, and the Catan continued their domination of the stars and their genocide, complete and full genocide of these Old Ones. The Old Ones did their best to stave it off. They even created other races, the Eldari and the Orcs, to try to fight off the horrifying Necron army and the Catan above them. But there was absolutely no possible chance for them. And the Old Ones were absolutely extinguished across the galaxy. Their entire race completely removed. Full-on 100% genocide. However, during all this, the Catan so just infatuated with their victory, started fighting each other for fun, for sport, and for small differences, doesn't matter. The Catan, with these overpowered people, they're going to eventually hit each other at some point. And as they began just menially fighting each other, the Eldari and the Orcs actually started pushing on the Catan's borders a little bit, giving them a little bit of a run for their money. And as this continued, this is when the Silent King, who retained his consciousness, decided to leap into action and start a full-scale revolt against their Catan masters. And this revolt was bloody, as the entire Necron army was surged off to destroy these star gods. They were able to, just after suffering horrendous losses, were able to turn the tide of the war. And they took these Catan and they blasted them. Because as these star gods are unkillable, they were able to break them into thousands of shards and entrap them in giant stasis vaults to now actually be slaves to the Necrons. And with the Necrons having the entirety of their old gods enslaved to them, they realized that soon their race was about to be attacked by the overcoming new races, the Eldari and the Krorks. And so what they did is they retreated into giant stasis tombs in order to preserve their energy and their strength for when one day they would be reawakened and they would be able to rule the galaxy that was rightfully theirs. And then some dingus Adeptus Mechanicus guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back, and they see all these primitive races on their lawns, and they think, get the fuck off of it. The Necrons are back, super advanced, and they are here to reclaim the galaxy that they so rightfully believe is theirs. Now, at tabletop, they're a lot like that. Tons of undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die, they just get right back up because they keep on reanimating. Hard to kill, tons of crazy stuff. You can use the Catan themselves as units to fight with. Pretty cool. The Necrons are one of the three major events in 40K. The Horus Heresy, the Fall of the Eldar, and the Awakening of the Necrons are all pretty substantial events. And the Necrons themselves are pretty dang cool as well. Here's a good quote from a wonderful Dawn of War game. Lucky creatures, as long last you have found the tranquility of death. I was like you once, clinging to life and blind to the truth. When I uncovered the truth, I too shuddered and paled with fear. Deep in these catacombs I was remade. Here my brethren slumbered for eons while the living grew like weed. My Lord knew this day would come. He had plans for us all. We would purge this world once more. So come, poor victims of life. We will grant you tranquility in these crypts. Kronos will be a tomb world once more. Necrons are also pretty smug. Trazen the Infinite especially, a little dickhead. But speaking of dickheads, last race, let's talk the Tau.
Tau.
The exact formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, in the 40K world that is, some Imperial navigation vessels were going around through different areas, and they saw a primitive race, blue people, smacking each other with sticks and stones. They thought, dumb Xenos race, who gives a shit? And they bailed. Then this giant warp storm occurred right in that major area, unable to be breached. Then, once that warp storm 6,000 years later subsided, hello, those little sticks. Well, they decided to actually have no war of any kind and all just unite together under one flag of the Tau Empire. And now they have gigantic starships and Gundam robots and lasers and guns and mechs, and they are here to ruin your day for the greater good. That is generally the Tau Empire. They have this kind of feeling of this homogenous group. All species can go underneath the banner of the greater good. The greater good is their idea of the fundamental increase and help of all. In fact, they are most likely the most like the Covenant in Halo, where they have the overarching prophets, being the ethereals, who are actually kind of dicks and like to pull at strings a little bit, but then you have all these different races directly underneath them, and they all work together in this big group as this large, foreboding race that tries to spread their weirdly pseudo-religious influence across the galaxy. The alien is not intrinsically evil. Do not hate him. Pity him, his ignorance. Seek to understand his differences and equate him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good. That is generally the Tau. And if you're kind of wondering like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have laser rifles and rail guns. They got giant mechs with tons of missile pods and heavy rail rifles and rail guns and burst cannons and ion accelerators and void shields and all this stuff. And that is generally what the Tau's all about. But you're probably thinking, Bricky, this doesn't sound that evil. This doesn't sound very grim, dark Warhammer. And you'd be right. The Tau Empire really don't have that much of a horrifying, grim, dark style like everybody else. They're much more younger, new age thing. In fact, they're probably a lot less evil and a lot even better than they are now back in the day because they liked having like that good guy faction. But a lot of us who really like the dark, depressing style of Warhammer didn't really like it that much. So, see, the Tau get a lot of hate. And a lot of that hate isn't necessarily unjustified. It's mainly from a tabletop perspective. But as you can see from all the visuals I've shown you recently, they don't really fit in the 40K universe very well. They lack that super dark, dramatic, kind of high gothic level the Imperium has. They don't have the weird kind of like grungy stuff that Chaos or say the Orcs do. And the Necrons and the Eldar have their own specific style as well. The Tau really do look like something out of Gundam. And while it isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does definitely not fit too well. There's that. There's also the tabletop problem. In tabletop, Tau are horrible at melee combat, but exceptionally good at range combat. So they blast everyone from really, really far away, and they have a million rules to make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat. So it basically just forces you to bottleneck the game into one specific gameplay style, which is gun to gun. And if you're doing gun to gun, they're going to win every time because they're the Tau, and the Tau are really damn good at shooting. So it's one of those things that make the Tau generally rather hated, and a lot of different reasons for that, both from style and such. But this is actually one of the things I wanted to end this video with, is that the Tau, while they have their issues, you should not be discouraged from playing them. I'll make plenty of Tau weeaboo jokes, of course I will, but it's all generally in good fun. Anyone who legitimately doesn't want you to play a faction is an idiot, and you shouldn't be giving them the time of day. You pick what you think is cool and what you like. In Warhammer, especially now, factions get better and they get worse. They grow and then they fall. You should only be playing what you think is cool. You like the look, you like the models. If you're talking tabletop, that is what you should be going for every time. It's what you think is badass, because things change all the time. But the universe of Warhammer has so much going for it. Every faction has something interesting. Every character has a story, and there's a million stories to be told. The universe is vast and exciting, and while it is dark, depressing, and horrible, that is the damn charm. And out of everything I've told you in these two videos, if anything you could take away is the reason why so many of us are so into this series and why we like it so much. Because with so much variety, such an expansive universe, and so much that can be done, you can find yourself having a pretty great time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it has been informative to you.
Okay, dude, so let's start off with the Necrons. What did you think about the Necrons?
The Necrons, I like. They're like old. They're older than the Eldari, but they're not as old as the old gods, because they were seeking immortality. I reckon they had it like rough. In the but I like them. I like them.
And like them petitioning the Catan and getting screwed over by the Catan and all that.
Well, the Catan, I would understand why they would do that. You know, from a perspective of like, oh, we have something against these guys. We've got immortality. We can dangle that as a carrot in front of them. We need slave labor for our own conquest, and they feel like they're in control of this situation. So of course they play them. It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's the nature of this universe is conquest. You can't be like, oh, help us, give us immortality, and then we'll defeat your enemies. Like, we'll defeat our enemies. You just be our slaves, and we'll defeat our enemies and vanquish any other foes, right? Like, that's a better deal for me. As if I was a Catan, someone asking like, "Oh Lord, have mercy, you grant me immortality." Like, no son, fuck you, become my slave, and then I'll get it done myself, you know. Because if I grant you immortality, then like, what's to say that after you're done with them, you won't come after me, you know? Like I said, why would I empower someone else in a dog-eat-dog world?
Oh yeah, and I guess what's your impression of that war in heaven in general? Like, how do you like that storyline? Like, I mean, you've barely gotten a taste now, but so the Necrons are waking up now and messing
I
up.
love the Necrons. I fully support the Necrons. I hope they take over. You know, they've been through so much. You know, they've been through so much.
You know, Cadia? They kept mentioning it.
We never really touched on.
So Cadia was the place where the Cadians, the best human regiments were. But Cadia was right next to the Eye of Terror, which is this portal. This is like a black hole warp, where the warp was very. It was like a hole in space-time, and the warp could leak out, and demons could leak out, and most of the Chaos Astartes formed their bases around that area, and they could attack from there and stuff like that. So anyway, how it's related to the Necrons is part of the reason they almost won was because the Necrons built this. The Necrons don't use the warp at all and stuff like that, and the Necrons can actually close the Eye of Terror with their technology. They have the technology. They're so sophisticated and technology-wise that they can mess up the Eye of Cadia.
I mean, they could seal gods.
Exactly.
Like Catan, who are on the level of the old gods who created these Eldar and orcs. Like, obviously, I mean, again, going back to when they would have to go and bargain with these gods, right? That, we have everything, we just don't have immortality. And then they fuck them over and they're like, well, fuck you. Now we got immortality. There's literally nothing stopping us. Because these other races are like the spawn of these races that we tussled with her. Like I'm the old pantheon. I'm part of the old gods and the Catan, and we're those old civilizations, like way older than you young races, you young consciousness, you young whatever. So I see the arrogance and I understand it. Like I get it. Like personally, if I was to put money on orcs and Eldari versus Necrons, like I love the orcs. Like I appreciate their aesthetic, and you know I just like the power. Eldari power is like they're formidable. I would bet on the Necrons to just wipe out these clowns. Right? I like Necrons.
All right. Okay, I think we can move on to the Tau. So yeah,
the Tau.
Yeah. How did you feel?
That was for me, it's kind of like an anticlimactic ending. Where like if he had taught us about the Tau after the humans, that would have been like, oh cool. And then he threw us explain something like the Tyranids, and then he starts getting more and more weird and wonderful. Then that would have made for a good sort of narrative. Then it was like took us all around the galaxy and then come back to the Tau Empire, who evolved under a cloud somehow away from the Eye of Man. I just feel that it's just like weak sauce. Storyline, they just felt like just to throw it in there for a power balance, or just to feel a certain
niche,
or sort of like a contrast, like a necessary, not a necessary evil, in this case a necessary good, to sort of like, you know, when you're eating so much spicy food and all of this, and you gotta have something like rice to just have a base for which you can have an appreciation for whatever else. So if you have like a sandwich, so Tau are like bread, right? Just a necessary good, you know, in a world of evil, just to cleanse the palates, so to speak, you know, just to.
I'll fill you in on one aspect of them. Like the Tau are definitely the most naive of the one. Like for example, they don't believe the Emperor is anywhere near as powerful as the humans say he is. Like they believe that it's all propaganda. They also don't believe in demons, for the most part. They're naive to the point where they think the demons of chaos are just another type of alien. Because they're like, so like there was this human character who made friends with a Tau, and he once brought him to his base where humans were. And then like it was just a regular servitor, which is a human who's been lobotomized and turned into a cyborg, but not like a conscious cyborg, obviously just a servant cyborg. That's why they call servitors. The Tau saw the servitor and then it vomited, and it found it disgusting. And if you really think about it, that makes sense. Because a servitor is a fucking walking corpse that's been robotomized and robot. If you saw that in real life, you would find it gross. But the humans in 40K are so far out there that like things that are normal to them would not be normal to us. And in a weird way, the Tau are actually the most humane in this universe.
It speaks to the age of their civilization. You see the Necrons here, they're old as balls, bro, and like they're more accepting and more like, yeah, violence, we get it, let's just be violent for what we want, you know, just coming to an acceptance of that. Whereas these younger races think you have to be violent for a cause. These older races, they understand that violence is a part of this universe. It's not even like we hate you or it's the rule. It's just, and you either be the violence or you're affected by the violence, subject to the violence. You're either the fucker or you're getting fucked, right?
Nice.
So
Okay.
I like it that the older races are like, nah, I'm gonna be a fucker, you know. And then the younger races are like, I'm only a fucker because of this, because I have my self-righteousness and we're fighting for a cause. They'll learn. They'll learn. You just either be a fucker or you're fucked, right?
Nice. No, I like that. I like that view.
Yeah,
All right.
simple way.
Last two things to live with. Out of all the aliens, what are the
Yeah.
ones you like the most?
You mean
Just try and rank them roughly.
top three?
Which three stuck out to you?
Necrons, Orcs, and
Tyranids, Eldars, Tau.
Tyranids, I'd say. I
Tyranids.
like Tyranids more than the Tau and more than the Eldar. I like the Tyranids because they're like a force of nature, you know. Just like
Okay, so then in general, your favorite faction, period. Like, including all the
Human
human ones
faction?
and including the Chaos.
top three.
Top three, yeah.
It'll be a tie between the Chaos Astartes and the Necrons, really. The Chaos Astartes and the Necrons. Because I like that the Necrons do not rely on the warp. They're a fully rounded out species or like a consciousness. They've come unto their own strength. And you know, first they were at a disadvantage where they asked for immortality from these gods. But then they're like, eventually annihilate these bastards, you know.
And the Chaos Astartes, what draws you to them?
I like the Chaos Astartes because the super soldier aesthetic, but also I guess the art, yeah, and like a bit tight because there's no one faction, Xeno, whatever that I
encompassing.
feel like it's like a, you know, and I do vibe with like I said, top three, like the Tyranids and the Orcs. I like their aesthetic as well. In fact, Orcs and Chaos Astartes are, to me, it's like similar. It's sort of like a beastly, but then you're like a super soldier because Astartes are just super cool.
I think we'll end here. We might do a video in the future about the Space Marines themselves. You said you like them? All the 18 different Primarchs and their legions. So we might do that video in the future. So happy to do that?
All for it, yeah. That'd be fun.
Okay.
Like just to get into like the lore and the philosophy and the...
Of each, because they each have their own like individual strengths and weaknesses too. So I think you'll enjoy that too when we get to it. All right, I think we'll end here. So yeah, say goodbye to everyone.
Thanks for watching. If you watched, I know I'm a bit cringy, but
Nah, you're great, bro. All right, looking forward to seeing you again.
awesome.
Bye.